It was a typical evening when I walked into our living room, only to find my wife, Jenna, pacing back and forth with a phone clutched in her hand. Her eyes were wild, and her face flushed with anger. "Dan, call me and tell me that you provided proof of our affair to his wife, and now she is filing for divorce," she snapped at me. I leaned against the door frame, smirking. "Oh, but you said they had an open marriage? That bastard lied to seduce you? But you know she's a very nice woman, and I'm sure she'll leave him with nothing in the divorce." Jenna S.'s face fell, and for a moment I almost felt a pang of guilt. Almost. "Are you serious? You actually told her?" she hissed. I nodded. Of course. She deserved to know the truth. Plus, it's not like you were planning to stop seeing him, were you? She glared at me, her eyes burning with a mix of rage and fear. I didn't want this. I just wanted something. Different. Different. I laughed bitterly. "You mean you wanted the thrill without the consequences?" "Dan, this isn't a funny," she snapped, her voice trembling. "You have no idea what you have done." "Oh, I have a pretty good idea," I said, walking over to the couch and sitting down. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around thinking I wouldn't find out. And now, you've dragged me into your mess." Jenna sank into the chair opposite me, burying her face in her hands. "What am I going to do?" I shrugged. "Maybe you should start by telling me the truth. How did it even begin with him?" She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "It was just supposed to be harmless fun. We met at a conference, and he was charming. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice softening despite myself. "Did I mean so little to you?" "It is not that, Dan. I love you, but—" She trailed off, unable to meet my gaze. "But what?" I pressed. "You needed more excitement? More passion?" She nodded, wiping away a tear. "Yes. I know it sounds selfish, but I wanted both. You and him, stability and excitement. And now?" I asked, leaning forward. "What do you want now?" "I don't know," she whispered. I don't want to lose everything." "Well, you might not have a choice," I said, standing up. "You've made your bed, Jenna. Now you have to lie in it." As I walked out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The tables had turned, and Jenna was finally facing the consequences of her actions. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The real fallout was yet to come. The next morning, the weight of last night's confrontation hung heavy in the air. Jenna barely touched her breakfast, her eyes constantly darting towards the door as if expecting her lover to walk in and save her from the mess she'd created. Meanwhile, I was lost in my own thoughts, replaying every moment of our marriage, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. It was mid-morning when my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at the screen and saw it was from Carrie, Jenna S. Lover S. wife. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I am seeing a lawyer today." I showed the text to Jenna, who read it with a mixture of dread and resignation. "She is really going through with it," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "I told you she would," I replied, my tone devoid of sympathy. "She's not the type to stay with a man who lies and cheats." Jenna looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Dan, can we just— I don't know, fix this somehow? I don't want a divorce. I don't want to lose you." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Jenna, you need to understand something. This isn't just about you wanting to stay married. It's about trust. You broke it, and I don't know if we can ever get it back." Before she could respond, there was a knock on the door. We both froze, exchanging a glance filled with mutual apprehension. I got up and walked to the door, opening it to reveal a man in a crisp suit holding an envelope. "Mr. Dan Miller?" he asked, his voice professional and detached. "Yes, that is me." He handed me the envelope. "You've been served," he said simply, before turning on his heel and walking away. I stared at the envelope for a moment before closing the door and turning to Jenna. "It is from Carrie," I said, tearing it open. Inside were the divorce papers for her husband, detailing his infidelity and demanding a substantial share of their assets. Jenna S.'s face went pale as she read over my shoulder. "Oh my God, she's really going to ruin him," she whispered. "Serves him right," I muttered. "And you too, if you don't figure out what you want and start making amends." Jenna S.'s phone rang, breaking the tense silence. She looked at the caller ID and her face drained of color. "It is him," she said, her voice shaking. "Answer it," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "Let's see what he has to say." She hesitated for a moment before pressing the answer button. "Hello?" I could hear his frantic voice on the other end but couldn't make out the words. Jenna S. responses were short and clipped, her face a mask of anxiety. "Yes, I got the papers." No, I didn't know she would do this. Dan found out and told her. "No, I don't think there's anything we can do to stop it. Yes, I know what it means for us." She hung up her hands, trembling. He is furious. Says I should have warned him. I scoffed. Warn him? About what? That his wife might not take kindly to him sleeping around. What did he expect? "I don't know," she said, sinking into a chair. "I don't know what to do." I felt a pang of pity for her, but it was quickly overshadowed by my own anger and hurt. "You need to start by being honest, Jenna. With him, with me, with yourself. Figure out what you really want, and then maybe, just maybe, we can start to pick up the pieces." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I will, Dan. I promise. I'll make this right." But as she sat there, broken and lost, I couldn't help but wonder if it was already too late. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and uneasy silences. Jenna tried to make amends in her own way, but the damage was done. Every time she reached out to touch me, I recoiled, unable to shake the image of her in someone else's arms. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room staring blankly at the TV, Jenna came in and sat down next to me. She took a deep breath and said, "Dan, I think we need to talk." I muted the TV and turned to face her. "About what? About us? About everything that's happened? I need to be honest with you, and you need to be honest with me. We can move forward if we don't." I nodded slowly. "All right, let's talk." She took another deep breath, visibly steeling herself. I started seeing him because I felt, I don't know, suffocated. Our life felt so predictable, so mundane. I know it's not an excuse, but I wanted something different, something exciting. "I get that," I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. "But why him? Why lie to me about it?" She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. He was there. He paid attention to me, made me feel special. And I lied because I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't affect our marriage. "Well, you thought wrong," I said bitterly. "You can have your cake and eat it too, Jenna. You can just have an affair and expect it not to impact our lives. I know that now," she whispered. "I realize how selfish and stupid I was. And I'm sorry, Dan. I really am. I want to make things right if you'll let me." I looked at her, seeing the genuine remorse in her eyes. "It's not that simple, Jenna. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and right now ours is in ruins. It's going to take a lot more than words to fix it." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes, I promise." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of her words hanging between us. Finally, I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. "There's something else you should know," I said quietly, my back still turned to her. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I've been talking to Carrie," I said, turning to face her. "We've been sharing information, trying to piece together the whole story. She told me that her husband has been lying to her for years and not just about you." Jenna S. eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "He's been cheating on her with multiple women," I continued. "You're not the first, and you probably want to be the last. He's been using the guise of an open marriage to seduce women and then discarding them when he gets bored." Jenna S. face paled. I didn't know. He told me they had an open marriage, that it was all above board." "Well, he lied," I said harshly, "and now Carrie is determined to make him pay. She is filing for divorce and plans to take him for everything he has got." Jenna slumped back into the couch, looking utterly defeated. "I can't believe I fell for his lies. I feel so stupid." "You're not the only one," I said, sitting back down beside her. "But now we have to figure out what comes next. For us." She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it tightly. "I want to fix this, Dan. I want us to be okay again. Please, just give me a chance." I looked into her eyes, seeing the hope and desperation there. "All right, Jenna. We'll try. But it's going to be a long road, and it won't be easy. I know, she whispered, but I am willing to do whatever it takes. As we sat there, holding hands, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild what had been broken. But deep down, I knew it would take more than promises and good intentions to heal the wounds left by her betrayal. As the days turned into weeks, Jenna and I tried to navigate the rocky terrain of rebuilding our relationship. We went to counseling sessions, both individually and together, attempting to understand the root causes of our problems and how we could address them. Despite the efforts, there was always an undercurrent of tension, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had brought us to this point. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Jenna's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it and quickly looked away, her face pale. "Who is that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "No one," she replied too quickly. "Just a spam message." I raised an eyebrow, not convinced. "Let me see." She hesitated, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Snatching the phone from the counter, I saw the message on the screen. It was from her lover. "We need to talk, now." Anger flared up inside me. "Jenna, what the hell is this? I thought you were done with him." "I am," she protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "I haven't seen or spoken to him since everything happened." "I swear." "Then why is he texting you?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why does he think you two need to talk?" She shook her head, panic in her eyes. "I don't know, Dan. I really don't. I haven't responded to any of his messages. He's been trying to contact me, but I ignored him. I threw the phone down on the counter in frustration. This is exactly what I was talking about, Jenna. How can I trust you when he's still trying to reach out to you?" She started to cry, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry, Dan. I don't know what to do. I blocked his number, but he keeps finding ways to contact me. I don't want anything to do with him anymore. I just want to fix things with you." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "All right. First things first. You're going to change your phone number. We can have him trying to worm his way back into your life." She nodded, wiping her tears away. "Okay, I'll do it first thing tomorrow. And second," I continued, "we need to be completely honest with each other from now on. No more secrets. If he tries to contact you again, you tell me immediately." "I promise," she said, her voice trembling. "No more secrets." The next day, Jenna changed her number, and we tried to move forward. But despite our efforts, the shadow of her affair loomed large over us. Every time her phone buzzed, every time she was late coming home, I couldn't help but wonder if it was happening again. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected email from Carrie. She had found more evidence against her husband, and she wanted to share it with me. I arranged to meet her at a local coffee shop, curious and apprehensive about what she had discovered. When I arrived, Carrie was already seated at a corner table, a thick folder in front of her. She looked up as I approached, giving me a small, sad smile. "Dan, thank you for meeting me," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "Of course," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "What did you find?" She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "I hired a private investigator. He found out that my husband has been having multiple affairs for years. He used different aliases, different stories to seduce women. Jenna was just one of many. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How many? "At least a dozen," she said, handing me the papers. "And that is just what we've confirmed. There could be more." I glanced through the documents, my hands shaking. "This is unbelievable. How did he manage to keep it all hidden?" "He is a master manipulator," Carrie said bitterly. "He knows how to cover his tracks, how to make each woman feel special and unique. But it is all lies." As I sat there, processing the information, a thought occurred to me. "Carrie, do you think Jenna knew about any of this?" Carrie shook her head. "I don't think so. From what the investigator found, he kept each affair completely separate. Jenna probably believed she was the only one." I nodded slowly. "That makes sense. But still, it doesn't make this any easier." "No, it doesn't, she agreed. "But at least now we know the truth, and we can move forward." "Yeah," I said, closing the folder. "Move forward." As I left the coffee shop, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with Carrie. We were both victims of the same man-s deceit, both struggling to rebuild our lives in the aftermath. And though it didn't make the pain any less, it was a small comfort to know we weren't alone. Despite the new revelations, life continued to move forward in a strange, tense rhythm. Jenna and I continued our counseling sessions, and though there were moments of genuine connection, the underlying tension remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of something that could either break us entirely or forge us into something stronger. One afternoon, as I was heading home from work, my phone rang. It was Carrie. "Dan, I need to talk to you. It's urgent," she said, her voice strained. "What is wrong?" I asked, my heart sinking. "It's about my husband." "There's something else you need to know," she replied. "Can we meet?" We agreed to meet at a small park nearby. When I arrived, Carrie was sitting on a bench, looking more anxious than I'd ever seen her. She handed me a manila envelope. "What is this?" I asked, opening it. "More evidence," she said, her voice shaking. "My investigator found out that my husband has been embezzling money from his company, and he has been using Jenna S.'s name to cover some of his tracks." I felt a chill run down my spine as I looked through the documents. "Are you saying Jenna S. involved in this?" "Not knowingly," Carrie said quickly, "but he forged her signature on several documents. If this comes to light, it could ruin her career too." I stared at the papers, feeling a mix of anger and dread. "What do we do?" "I've already filed a report with the authorities," Carrie said, "but I thought you should know. Jenna needs to be prepared in case this blows up." "Thanks for telling me," I said, my mind racing. "I'll talk to her." When I got home, Jenna was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up and smiled, but her smile faded when she saw my expression. "What's wrong, Dan?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We need to talk," I said, setting the envelope on the counter. "Carrie found out something new about your lover." Jenna S.'s face went pale as she opened the envelope and scanned the contents. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I had no idea." "I believe you," I said, taking her hand. "But we need to be ready. Carrie S. already reported it to the authorities, but if this comes out, it could get ugly." Jenna nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "What do we do?" "We stick together," I said firmly, "and we keep being honest with each other. No more secrets, remember?" "Yes," she whispered. "No more secrets." The next few days were a blur of anxiety and waiting. We tried to carry on with our normal lives, but the looming threat of the investigation hung over us like a dark cloud. One evening, Jenna received a call from her boss, asking her to come in for a meeting the next day. "They know," she said, her voice shaking as she hung up the phone. "They're going to question me about the documents. I'll go with you," I said immediately. "You're not facing this alone." The next morning, we drove to her office in silence. Jenna was visibly nervous, her hands trembling as she clutched her bag. I reached over and squeezed her hand, trying to offer some comfort. When we arrived, her boss, Mr. Stevens, greeted us with a stern expression. "Jenna, Dan, please come in." We sat down in his office, and Mr. Stevens wasted no time getting to the point. "Jenna, we've received some concerning information regarding your involvement in some financial discrepancies. Can you explain this?" Jenna took a deep breath and explained everything, from the affair to the forged documents. Mr. Stevens listened, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for your honesty," he said finally. "We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation, but for now, I suggest you take a leave of absence. This situation needs to be handled delicately." Jenna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand." As we left the office, I put my arm around her shoulders. "We'll get through this," I whispered. "Together." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you, Dan. I don't deserve your support, but I'm so grateful for it." "You are my wife," I said simply, and we made a promise to each other, for better or worse. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of dread and hope. The investigation was ongoing, and Jenna S. Lover was facing serious charges. We knew that our lives would never be the same, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were facing the storm together, and maybe, just maybe, we could come out the other side stronger. The storm clouds of the investigation loomed over us, but in the midst of it all, Jenna and I found a fragile sense of unity. Our counseling sessions became more profound as we began to delve deeper into the issues that had plagued our marriage long before the affair. One evening, after another intense counseling session, Jenna and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The silence between us was comfortable, almost healing. "Dan," she began softly, breaking the quiet, "do you think we can ever really move past this?" I sighed, looking out at the fading light. "I don't know, Jenna, but I think if we keep trying, keep being honest with each other, maybe we can. It's going to take time." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "I want to believe that. I really do. But sometimes it feels like we're just waiting for the next disaster." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I answered it cautiously, my heart pounding. "Hello? Mr. Dan Miller?" A stern voice on the other end said. "This is Detective Harris from the Financial Crimes Unit. We need you and your wife to come down to the station tomorrow for further questioning regarding the investigation." My stomach churned. "All right, Detective, we'll be there." After hanging up, I turned to Jenna, who had heard the entire conversation. "They want us at the station tomorrow. More questioning." She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Okay, we can do this." The next morning, we drove to the station in tense silence. When we arrived, we were led to a small, windowless room where Detective Harris waited. He was a no-nonsense man, his piercing gaze making it clear that he meant business. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, thank you for coming in," he said, gesturing for us to sit. "I want to assure you that we are doing everything we can to get to the bottom of this, but we need your cooperation." "We are here to help," I said, squeezing Jenna S. hand under the table. "Good," he replied, opening a file. "Mrs. Miller, we need to clarify some details about the documents that were forged using your name. Can you walk us through your interactions with your husband's lover?" Jenna took a deep breath, recounting her meetings and conversations with him. As she spoke, I could see the guilt and regret etched on her face. When she finished, Detective Harris nodded. "Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Miller. This helps us a lot. Now there is one more thing. We need you to identify any communication you might have had with him that could be relevant to our investigation." Jenna handed over her phone, showing the messages she had received and ignored. Detective Harris took notes, his expression grave. After what felt like an eternity, he closed the file and looked at us. "I appreciate your cooperation. We will keep you informed as the investigation progresses. For now, I recommend staying vigilant and avoiding any contact with him." We left the station feeling drained but somewhat relieved. The next few weeks were a blur of uncertainty as we waited for updates from the investigation. During that time, Jenna and I focused on rebuilding our relationship, finding solace in small moments of connection. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Jenna turned to me with a determined look in her eyes. "Dan, there is something I need to tell you." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What is it?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," she began, her voice steady. "And I realized that part of the reason I strayed was because I felt like we were drifting apart. But I also know that I didn't do enough to communicate my feelings to you." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "I get that, Jenna. And I know I wasn't always the best at picking up on your signals. But we are here now, and we are trying to make it work." She took my hand, her grip firm. "I want us to make a promise to each other. No matter what happens, we'll always be honest and open, even if it's hard, even if it hurts. We owe it to each other and to ourselves." I squeezed her hand back, feeling a glimmer of hope. "I promise, Jenna. No more secrets." Just as we shared this moment of resolution, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I answered it. "Mr. Miller, this is Detective Harris. We've made some significant progress in the case. I'd like to meet with you and Mrs. Miller tomorrow to discuss the next steps." "Of course, Detective," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll be there." As I hung up, Jenna looked at me with a mix of fear and determination. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," she said firmly. "Together," I echoed, pulling her close. The next day, we arrived at the station, bracing ourselves for whatever news awaited us. Detective Harris greeted us and led us to the same small room. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," he began, his tone serious. "We've gathered enough evidence to charge your husband as lover with embezzlement and forgery. He's been taken into custody, and we believe this will help clear Mrs. Miller's name." Relief washed over us, but Detective Harris continued. "However, there is still the matter of the damage done to your reputation and career, Mrs. Miller. It's going to be a long process, but we will support you every step of the way." "Thank you," Jenna said, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you so much." As we left the station, a sense of hope and determination filled us. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, we felt like we had a chance to rebuild, to move forward together. The news of Jenna's lover's arrest spread quickly, bringing a mix of relief and tension into our lives. The looming uncertainty of the legal process still hung over us, but knowing that justice was being served brought a small sense of peace. Jenna took her leave of absence seriously, using the time to reflect and heal. She spent more time at home, and we started to reconnect in ways we hadn't in years. Simple things like cooking dinner together or taking long walks in the evening became moments of quiet intimacy that began to rebuild our trust. One evening, as we were washing dishes, Jenna turned to me, her face thoughtful. "Dan, I've been thinking, maybe we should get away for a while. Just the two of us. Clear our heads and really focus on us." I wiped my hands on a towel and considered her suggestion. "A trip might be exactly what we need." "Where do you want to go?" "Somewhere quiet, away from everything," she said, a hint of hope in her voice. "Maybe a cabin in the mountains?" I smiled, imagining the serene setting. "That sounds perfect. Let us do it." We found a secluded cabin in the mountains, and within a week we were packed and on our way. The drive was long but scenic, giving us plenty of time to talk about our hopes and fears and to start laying the foundation for a stronger relationship. When we arrived, the cabin was even more beautiful than the pictures had shown. Nestled among tall trees with a clear view of a sparkling lake, it felt like the perfect escape from our troubles. The first few days were blissfully peaceful. We hiked through the woods, fished in the lake, and spent our evenings by the fire, talking and laughing like we used to. It felt like we were rediscovering each other, finding the pieces of ourselves that had been lost in the chaos of the past months. One afternoon, as we were lounging on the porch, Jenna turned to me with a serious expression. "Dan, there's something I need to tell you." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice steady. "About us, about what happened, and about our future. And I realized that part of the reason I strayed was because I felt like I wasn't being true to myself. I was trying to be someone I thought you wanted me to be, instead of who I really am." I nodded, listening intently. "I understand, Jenna, and I think I was doing the same thing. We both lost sight of who we are and what we really want." She reached out and took my hand. "I want us to promise each other that from now on, we'll always be honest about our needs and desires, no more pretending, no more hiding. We have to be real with each other, even if it is uncomfortable." "I promise," I said, squeezing her hand. "No more pretending." We sat there holding hands and watching the sun set over the lake, feeling a renewed sense of hope and determination. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were truly on the same page. As the days passed, we continued to talk and reconnect, finding new ways to strengthen our bond. We even started to plan for the future, discussing our dreams and goals, and how we could support each other in achieving them. One evening, as we were sitting by the fire, Jenna turned to me with a shy smile. "Dan, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "What's that?" I asked, curious. Would you be open to renewing our vows?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I know it sounds cliché, but I want to make new promises to each other, to symbolize our new beginning." I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked into her eyes. "I'd love that, Jenna. I really would." We spent the next few days planning a small, intimate vow renewal ceremony by the lake. It was simple and beautiful, just the two of us, reaffirming our commitment to each other and to our future together. As we stood there holding hands and reciting our vows, I felt a sense of peace and happiness that I hadn't felt in a long time. We had been through so much, but we had come out the other side stronger and more united than ever. After the ceremony, we celebrated with a quiet dinner on the porch, toasting to our new beginning and the journey ahead. Here's to us, Jenna said, raising her glass, to a future filled with honesty, love, and trust. To us, I echoed, clinking my glass against hers, and to never giving up on each other. As we sipped our wine and watched the stars come out, I realized that we had truly turned a corner. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were ready to face it together, hand in hand. Returning home from our trip felt like stepping back into reality, but this time we were armed with a newfound sense of purpose and unity. The cabin had been a sanctuary, allowing us to reconnect and heal. Now, we were ready to face the challenges ahead together. The first test of our renewed commitment came sooner than expected. Jenna's leave of absence was over, and she had to return to work. The investigation into the forged documents was still ongoing, and tensions were high at her office. On her first day back, I could see the anxiety etched on her face as she prepared for work. "You can do this," I said, giving her a reassuring hug. "Just be honest and stay strong." "Thank you, Dan," she replied, kissing me softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The day seemed to stretch on forever as I waited for Jenna to return. When she finally walked through the door, she looked exhausted but relieved. "How did it go?" I asked, eager to hear about her day. "It was tough," she admitted, sinking into the couch. "There were a lot of questions, and some of my colleagues were distant. But Mr. Stevens was supportive, and he assured me that the company believes I was a victim in this too." I sat down beside her, taking her hand. "That is good to hear. One step at a time, right?" "Right," she said, managing a small smile. One step at a time. As the weeks went by, Jenna and I settled into a new routine. We continued our counseling sessions, and slowly but surely, the trust between us began to rebuild. We also started to rekindle old hobbies and interests that we had neglected over the years, finding joy in shared activities like hiking, cooking, and even taking a dance class together. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, Jenna's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it and frowned. "It's from Carrie. She wants to meet." "Did she say why?" I asked, feeling a knot of apprehension in my stomach. "No, just that it's important," Jenna replied, looking worried. We agreed to meet Carrie at a nearby cafe the next day. When we arrived, she was already there, a serious expression on her face. "Thanks for coming," she said as we sat down. "I have some news, and I thought you should hear it from me." "What is it?" Jenna asked, her voice tense. "The authorities have finished their investigation," Carrie said, glancing at both of us. "They've decided to drop all charges against you, Jenna. They found enough evidence to prove that you were unaware of the forgery and embezzlement." Relief washed over Jenna's face. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, tears of gratitude filling her eyes. "That is not all," Carrie continued. "My husband has agreed to a plea deal. He'll serve time for his crimes, and in exchange, he has provided information on other illicit activities he has been involved in." I felt a surge of anger mixed with relief. "So he is finally getting what he deserves." "Yes," Carrie said, nodding. "And Jenna, I want you to know that I never blamed you for what happened. You were as much a victim as I was." "Thank you, Carrie," Jenna said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I appreciate that." As we left the cafe, a sense of closure settled over us. The legal battles were behind us, and we could finally focus on moving forward without the shadow of Jenna's lover hanging over us. Life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. Jenna was welcomed back at work with open arms, and her colleagues began to treat her with the respect she deserved. We continued to grow closer, finding new ways to strengthen our relationship and build a future together. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set, Jenna turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Dan, there's something I have been wanting to talk to you about." "What is that?" I asked, curious. "I've been thinking about what we went through," she began, her voice steady. And I realized that I want to use our experience to help others. Maybe we could start a support group or a blog, sharing our story and offering advice to couples going through similar situations. I smiled, proud of her strength and determination. I think that's a wonderful idea. We've learned so much, and if we can help others avoid the same mistakes, it would be worth it. We spent the next few weeks brainstorming and planning, and soon our blog was up and running. We shared our journey, from the painful beginnings to the steps we took to rebuild our marriage. The response was overwhelming, with couples reaching out to us for support and advice. Through it all, Jenna and I continued to grow closer, our bond stronger than ever. We knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but we were ready to face them together. As we sat on the porch one evening reflecting on our journey, I realized how far we had come. The pain and betrayal that had once threatened to destroy us had instead become the foundation for a stronger, more honest relationship. Here's to us, I said, raising a glass of wine. To love, honesty, and never giving up. To us, Jenna echoed, clinking her glass against mine, and to the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. We had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held, together. Our blog, aptly named Rebuilding Together, quickly gained traction. We shared our story in raw, unfiltered detail, offering advice and support to those going through similar struggles. The messages and comments we received were both heartwarming and heartbreaking, as people opened up about their own experiences with infidelity and the challenges of rebuilding trust. One evening, as we were responding to comments on the blog, Jenna turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of excitement and determination. Dan, I've been thinking, what if we host a small retreat for couples who are trying to work through infidelity? A weekend away, like we had, where they can focus on healing and reconnecting. I considered the idea, feeling a surge of pride for Jenna's resilience and vision. I think that's a fantastic idea. It could really help people. Do you have any places in mind? I was thinking of that cabin we stayed at, she said, smiling. It was so peaceful and perfect for what we were trying to do. We spent the next few weeks planning the retreat, reaching out to couples who had connected with us through the blog. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and soon we had a small group of couples signed up for our first retreat. As the weekend approached, Jenna and I prepared the cabin, stocking it with everything we would need for group sessions, private counseling, and activities designed to help couples reconnect. When the couples arrived, there was a palpable sense of hope and apprehension in the air. The first evening, we all gathered around the fire pit sharing our stories. It was a powerful experience, hearing the raw emotions and struggles that each couple had faced. Jenna and I shared our journey, offering our insights and the steps we took to rebuild our trust. The next day was filled with activities designed to foster communication and intimacy. We led guided discussions, trust-building exercises, and even took a hike together, encouraging couples to open up and support one another. One couple, Sarah and Mike, stood out to us. They were clearly struggling, their interactions tense and guarded. During one of the group sessions, Sarah broke down in tears. "I don't know if I can ever trust him again," she sobbed. "Every time I look at him, I see the betrayal." Mike looked devastated, his own eyes filled with tears. "I made a terrible mistake and I regret it every day. But I love you, Sarah. I want to make this work." Jenna and I shared a glance, recognizing the pain and fear in their eyes. We took them aside for a private session, encouraging them to speak openly and honestly. "Rebuilding trust takes time," Jenna said gently. "It's not something that happens overnight, but if you are both committed to being honest and vulnerable, it can be done." Sarah wiped her tears away, looking at Mike with a mix of anger and hope. "I want to believe that. I just don't know how." "It starts with small steps," I said, reaching out to take Jenna's hand. "Every day, you make a choice to trust each other a little more, to be honest, even when it is hard, and to remember why you fell in love in the first place." By the end of the weekend, we saw a glimmer of hope in Sarah and Mike's relationship. They were talking more openly, holding hands, and even sharing a few laughs. It was a small victory, but it reminded us why we started this journey. As the couples left, each with a renewed sense of hope and determination, Jenna and I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. We had turned our pain into something meaningful, something that could help others heal. That evening, as we sat by the fire, Jenna leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I think this weekend was a success," she said softly. I nodded, wrapping my arm around her. "I think so too. We really made a difference." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with love. "Thank you, Dan, for everything, for not giving up on us." I kissed her forehead, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Jenna, for being willing to fight for us. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered, snuggling closer. As we sat there watching the flames dance, I realized that we had not only rebuilt our relationship, but had also found a new purpose. Our journey was far from over, but we were ready to face whatever came next. Together. The months that followed our first retreat were some of the most fulfilling of our lives. We continued to host more retreats, each one a testament to the resilience and strength of the couples who attended. Our blog flourished, and we even started a podcast, where we discussed various topics related to relationships, trust, and healing. One day, as we were preparing for an upcoming retreat, Jenna received an unexpected message. It was from Carrie. "Can we meet? I have something important to tell you both." We arranged to meet her at the same cafe where we had so many difficult conversations before. When we arrived, Carrie was already there, looking more composed and determined than ever. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, smiling as we sat down. "I wanted to share some good news with you." "What's going on?" Jenna asked, her curiosity piqued. Carrie took a deep breath, her smile widening. "I have decided to start my own support group for people who have gone through similar experiences. Your blog and retreats have inspired me, and I want to help others the way UV helped me." Jenna and I exchanged a look of surprise and pride. "That's incredible, Carrie," I said. "We couldn't be happier for you." "Thank you," she replied, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You've shown me that there's a way forward, even after betrayal and heartbreak. I want to give others that same hope." As we talked, Carrie shared her plans for the support group, and we offered to help in any way we could. It was a full-circle moment, seeing how far we'd all come and how our pain had turned into something positive. After the meeting, Jenna and I took a walk through the park, reflecting on everything that had happened. "Can you believe it?" she said, shaking her head. "We've come so far." "We really have," I agreed, "and it's all because we refused to give up on each other." She smiled, taking my hand. "I'm so proud of us, Dan, and I'm excited about the future." "Me too," I said, squeezing her hand. "We have so much to look forward to." That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a publishing company. They were interested in turning our blog and podcast into a book, sharing our story and advice with an even wider audience. "Jenna, look at this," I said, showing her the email. Her eyes widened in surprise and excitement. "Oh my God, Dan, this is amazing." "A book?" "I know," I said, grinning. "Can you believe it?" We spent the rest of the evening discussing the possibilities and what we wanted to include in the book. It felt like a new chapter was beginning, one filled with hope, healing, and endless possibilities. As we lay in bed that night, Jenna turned to me, her eyes filled with love. "I can wait to see what the future holds for us, Dan. We've been through so much, but we were stronger now." I kissed her gently, feeling a deep sense of contentment, and we'll face whatever comes next, together. The journey to rebuild our marriage had been long and arduous, filled with moments of doubt and pain. But through it all, we had found a way to turn our struggles into something meaningful, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. Our love had been tested and had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more honest than ever before. As I held Jenna in my arms, I knew that we were ready for whatever the future held. Together, we had faced the darkness and found the light. And together, we would continue to build a life filled with love, trust, and endless possibilities.